This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning, and I have no idea why I have my headphones on since I'm reading from an article and not watching a video. I guess old habits are hardly dying. I hope you're all doing well this morning. Hope you've had a good weekend so far. I had a very active weekend starting yesterday. I was on a road trip with Sister Scribe to go visit our parents to celebrate my father's birthday, and it was a long trip due to traffic and other timing things and stuff, but it was nice to see my folks, nice to hang out for a little bit. But somewhere along the way in this trip, I mentioned that I hadn't even figured out what I was going to do for the Sunday stream. And Sister Scribe was like, well, I just read this article, ... and it intrigued me enough to give it a shot for the show. So this is all her fault. If you don't like this episode, if you don't like the article, you can blame Sister Scribe. Yes, my sister is a something of a stand-up comedian in her free time, from time to time, and so this story struck home for her, I guess, and so we're going to go over it together today. I haven't read this article. I am peripherally aware of the subject of the article. Though I'm not familiar with his comedy all that much, but I do know the name. And I remember seeing the advertisement for his big special. I think it was a Netflix special, if I'm not mistaken. I guess I'll find out as we go. But given the, let's say, tempo of Hollywood these days, and certain things that have come out in the news in the last several days and in the past, I thought it might be an interesting look just for the sake of some change, a little variety in our lives, a little diversity in my content. But before I get into that, who's joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning? Mike Savage, Blurred, Young Geezer, good morning. Mike R., good morning. Noah Asensio, good morning. Who else is here? Let's see. Grand Inquisitor Tyr Alexander, good morning. Nathaniel Rotskull, good morning. Liesel7, good morning. Robert Pincus, good morning. Brittany Holland, good morning. Bash Your Doggy, good morning. Megan Ring, good morning. Advocatus Diaboli, good morning. Misinformation, good morning. Ercole Di Stefano, good morning. Tall Person, good morning. Who else is here? Shadow Claw, good morning. Let me scroll. Simon Willikins, good morning. I wanted to go to bed, but here I am, pissed off that the only computer I have access to can't handle opening all the folders in my photo library folder without crashing and restarting after. You know, that it almost reads as sort of like abstract poetry. Not to make light of your frustration, Simon, but all the same. Good morning. Ostzan, good morning. TC Lachance, good morning. And I think that's everyone. If I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good morning. All right, so this one comes to us from the New Yorker. Very fancy magazine. In fact, so fancy, I can't afford it. This is the only article I get to look at before they're going to lock me out. So I'm glad I picked this one. So Hasan Minhaj's quote-unquote emotional truths. I do like a good phrase. It reminds me of like aspirational diversity goals and things like that. But let's go. In his stand-up specials, the former Patriot Act host often recounts harrowing experiences he's faced as an Asian American and Muslim American. Does it matter that much of it never happened to him? Well, I don't know. My sister and I, what little she told me about this story, we had a minor debate on the way home, in that if a comedian is telling a story during a bit, right, on stage, it's a joke, it's meant to be a punchline, telling a story that has some embellishments or may even be entirely fictional for the sake of the bit, there's no complaint there. The question is that after you're off the stage, if you're telling anecdotes about your real life, that's where the sort of the blurred lines between entertainment and personal honesty kind of gel, I think, a bit more, but we'll go through the article. Let's see. Can I zoom in on this a little bit just for a little? Okay. All right. We'll do that. Is that clear enough on there? All right. The comedian Hasan Minhaj came of age as a practicing Muslim in an Indian family in post 9/11 America. His Netflix series, Patriot Act, a comedy news show in the mold of The Daily Show and Last Week Tonight, was named for the defining law of that era. The series won an Emmy and a Peabody Award during its 2-year run. His stage work as a stand-up comic has led to 2 Netflix comedy specials, which have drawn plaudits? Okay, for Minhaj's blend of autobiographical storytelling and social justice commentary. My favorite. He recently conducted a lengthy sit-down interview with Barack Obama and is a leading candidate to succeed Trevor Noah as the next host of The Daily Show. I wonder how his chances look now. In 2019, Minhaj was selected as one of Time magazine's most influential people. In an accompanying article, Noah wrote, quote, "We've needed Hasan's voice since Donald Trump came down that golden escalator and turned immigrants and Muslims into his targets," unquote. Minhaj's whip-smart commentary, charisma, and sincerity, he went on, was, quote, "a constant reminder that Hasan is America, and America is Hasan," unquote. So glowing. So glowing. In Minhaj's approach to comedy, he leans heavily on his own experience as an Asian American and Muslim American, telling harrowing stories of law enforcement entrapment and personal threats. For many of his fans, he has become an avatar for the power of representation in entertainment. But after many weeks of trying, I had been unable to confirm some of the stories that he had told on stage. When we met on a recent afternoon at a comedy club in the West Village, Minhaj acknowledged for the first time that many of the anecdotes he related in his Netflix specials were untrue. Still, he said that he stood by his work. Quote, "Every story in my style is built around a seed of truth," unquote, he said. My comedy Arnold Palmer is 70% emotional truth. This happened, and then 30% hyperbole, exaggeration, fiction, unquote. Okay, wait, hold on. Okay, and I realize this was in the subtitle of the article, but all the same, seeing it in context is even more ridiculous. My comedy Arnold Palmer is 70% emotional truth. This happened, and then 30% hyperbole, exaggeration, and fiction. Well, of that 70%, how much of it is emotional and how much of it is actually truth at that point? Emotional truth. Okay. In Minhaj's 2022 Netflix stand-up special, The King's Jester, a biographical reflection on fame, vainglory, and Minhaj's obsession with social media clout, that might explain some things. He relays a story about an FBI informant who infiltrated his family's Sacramento area mosque in 2002 when Minhaj was a junior in high school. Pardon me. I was supposed to say junior high school. As Minhaj tells it, brother Eric, a muscle-bound white man who said he was a convert to Islam, gained the trust of the mosque community. He went to dinner at Minhaj's house and even offered to teach weight training to the community's teenage boys. But Minhaj had brother Eric pegged from the beginning. Oh, he did. Eventually, brother Eric tried to entice the boys into talking about jihad. Minhaj decided to mess with brother Eric, telling him that he wanted to get his pilot's license. Soon the police were on the scene, slamming Minhaj against the hood of a car. Wow. Years later, while watching the news with his father, Minhaj saw a story about Craig Montiel? I don't know who that is, who assumed the cover of a personal trainer when he became an FBI informant in Muslim communities in Southern California. Quote, well, Papa, look who it is, Minhaj recalls telling his father. It's our good friend, brother Eric, unquote. Okay. On stage, a large screen behind Minhaj flashes news footage from an Al Jazeera English report on Montiel. Minhaj's teenage hunch, it seems, was proved right. Uh-huh. The moment is played for laughs, but the story underscores the threat that being Muslim in the United States carried during the early days of the War on Terror. Minhaj segues to the case of Hamid Hayat, a young man from another Sacramento area town who spent much of his adult life in prison based on a confession his attorneys say was coerced. Quote, "He just got out of prison this past June," Minhaj says, his tone turning defiant. "Man, he's my age. He's 36. I think about Hamid all the time," unquote. Later in the special, Minhaj speaks about the fallout from the Patriot Act segments on the killing of Jamal Khashoggi and Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalism. Okay. The big screen displays threatening tweets that were sent to Minhaj. Most disturbing, he tells the story of a letter sent to his home, which was filled with white powder. The contents accidentally spilled onto his young daughter. The child was rushed to the hospital. It turned out not to be anthrax, but it's a sobering reminder that Minhaj's comedic actions have real-world consequences. Later that night, his wife, in a fury, told him that she was pregnant with their second child. Quote, "You get to say whatever you want on stage, and we have to live with the consequences," unquote, Minhaj recalls her saying. Quote, "I don't give a that Time magazine thinks you're an influencer. If you ever put my kids in danger again, I will leave you in a second," unquote. This is a family show, by the way. And that's the reason why. Does it matter that neither of those things really happened to Minhaj? Yes. Prior to my meeting with Minhaj, Montiel, aka Brother Eric, had told me that Minhaj's story is a fabrication. Quote, "I have no idea why he would do that," unquote, Montiel said. Montiel was in prison in 2002 and didn't begin work for the FBI on counterterrorism measures until 2006. Details of his undercover actions were cataloged in a legal case that has made its way to the Supreme Court. Montiel said that he worked only in Southern California, not the Sacramento area. Okay. The New York Police Department, which investigates incidents of possible Bacillus anthracis, has no record of an incident like the one Minhaj describes, nor do area hospitals. Front desk and mailroom employees at Minhaj's former residence don't remember such an incident, nor do Patriot Act employees involved with the show's security or Minhaj's security guard from the time. During our conversation, Minhaj admitted that his daughter had never been exposed to a white powder and that she hadn't been hospitalized. Okay, so again, just to pause here a second. As my sister and I discussed yesterday, even though I hadn't read this article first, if you're making a joke, if you're telling a ridiculous, absurd story on stage as part of a bit, as part of a premise, as part of leading to a punchline, even if you're drawing from your real life, fine. It didn't really happen that way. But none of what he was talking about there were jokes. He was relaying information. There was no comedy there. It was like, man, wasn't it funny when I joked around with this guy? Yeah, I guess. But then you compare yourself to a guy that, by your own estimation, was a real victim of police malfeasance, and nothing like that ever happened to you. So you're aligning yourself with someone that, by your estimate, is a real victim, and you're also putting yourself in the category of having your and your family's lives threatened by some unknown actor trying to terrorize you, and none of that ever happened either. So you're fabricating a victim narrative for yourself to bolster your own sense of importance, especially to other people, and to leverage other people's sympathy. So, yeah, that matters. That matters about your personal credibility a lot. Just a little. I don't know. Let me start over. During our conversation, Minhaj admitted that his daughter had never been exposed to a white powder and that she hadn't been hospitalized. He had opened up a letter delivered to his apartment, he said, and it had contained some sort of powder. Oh, is this the version we're supposed to believe? Is the emotional truth of the truth that you add on a whole bunch of events and include a bunch of people that never had anything to do with anything? Is that it? Okay. Minhaj said that he had made a joke to his wife saying, "Holy, what if this was anthrax?" He said that he'd never told anyone on the show about this letter, despite the fact that there were concerns for his security at the time and that Netflix had hired protection for Minhaj. Why? Based on his lies? Okay. The Brother Eric story, Minhaj said, was based on a hard foul he received during a game of pickup basketball in his youth. What? Wait, hold on. Let me wet my palate there for a second before I continue. The Brother Eric story, Minhaj said, was based on a hard foul he received during a game of pickup basketball in his youth. Minhaj and other teenage Muslims played pickup games with middle-aged men whom the boys suspected were officers. One made a show of pushing Minhaj to the ground. Minhaj insisted that, though both stories were made up, they were based on emotional truth. Wait. You turn someone pushing you down in a basketball game into this specific individual infiltrated my family's mosque and tried to set us up for what, entrapment, and then I was pushed onto a hood and I was then what, questioned, arrested. Come on, based on emotional oh boy, I didn't know it was going to be this bad. The broader points he was trying to make justified concocting stories in which to deliver them. Quote, the punchline is worth the fictionalized premise, unquote, he said. What's the punchline? No, seriously, I mean, maybe I'd have to watch it to get some context here, but just in the description of how he relayed this information on stage, where's the punchline? You tell a story. The only humor in it, I guess, is that in your own story, your teenage self was being a smartass. And you tried to jerk around with who you suspected to be a plant because you were just, obviously just so intuitive about that. Where's the joke? Where's the joke? You were concocting a story of law enforcement overreach and abuse. You were comparing yourself to someone in real life who had suffered that same fate, as you describe it. And then what? And your daughter had white powder fall on her from a letter sent to you, meant to scare and or, if the powder had been something else, try to murder you. And then you took your daughter to the hospital. I mean, it just becomes more and more convoluted over time, doesn't it? Oh my gosh. Let's see. Over back to the chat real quick as soon as StreamYard catches up. Thank you, C. Thomas. Emotional truth sounds like my truth equals fibs. Yeah, it's emotional truth. I have an emotional friend, an emotional truth, an aspirational goal. Emotional truth. Man. Okay. The punchline is worth the fictionalized premise, he said. Yeah, when you're doing a bit on stage, not when you're saying this is something that happened in my life. People don't necessarily go into stand-up shows expecting airtight truths. They expect laughs, perhaps some trenchant observation. On John Heilman's podcast earlier this year, Minhaj described his work as, quote, the dynamic range that theater and storytelling and comedy allow you to explore, unquote. Does that mean audiences should expect his words on stage to stringently hew to the facts on the ground? The slipperiness of memoir finds a new dimension when it's played for laughs in front of a crowd. Yeah, but none of it was true. And he leaned on it as a fact of his life. And nothing that I read there sounded like a punchline. It sounded like anecdote. Just anecdote. Well, where was the punchline? Okay. Anyway. Keeverdam, thank you so much for the bowing, presenting me with a bone. Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wowie. Wow.
Oh, that was a P-Dog Night, Dogcat Fox. Thank you so much, Keeverdam. Appreciate it. Also, StreamYard is telling me that my signal strength is awfully low. Am I roboting by any chance? Am I is my coming through a little off? Let me know in the chat real quick. it's very difficult for me to measure what that little warning is supposed to mean for my show. Like, does that just mean like the speed is slowed down or the quality is dropped? I can't tell. You're fine. Sounds fine to me. Okay, good. I get a little paranoid about that, as you may have noticed. All right. During our meeting, Minhaj drew a hard line between his hosting duties on Patriot Act and his stage work. In his Netflix specials, he said he was allowed to create characters and events in service of storytelling to sharpen his social points. Okay. When you're on the stage in front of a mic and you're belting out jokes, nobody's necessarily expecting you to tell the truth. Like Norm Macdonald, right? Let's think about Norm Macdonald for a second. Saint Norm. Right. You watch him tell a story joke on stage. You watch him tell a story joke about, how about the science school or science university or whatever, University of Science. Look up that joke. It's great. Anyway, when he's telling a story like that and it's funny and there's a punchline to it and it's a joke, you don't anticipate that it's actually autobiographical. Okay? Norm is using himself as an avatar in the story to relate himself to the thing and also to the audience and so on. And yeah, I don't honestly believe that every story Norm Macdonald told about himself or his father or his uncle or anything else was necessarily 100% true, because Norm Macdonald is a comedian, and when he's telling a story, he's telling it for a laugh. What about a letter sent to your home filled with powder that ended up on your small daughter, who then had to be taken to the hospital? Where's the joke? Where's the punchline? Where's the answer to why the moth went to see the psychiatrist? Not to give away all of Norm's material. These are the things I don't understand about this explanation. Thank you again, C. Thomas. I wonder when he's going to blame Whitnats. I don't know. I don't know when he's going to give us an excuse. So far, it's just an emotional truth. I was just, embellishing for the sake of comedy. I guess my real question is, will our authors start picking apart what is and is not appropriate, or what is and is not autobiographical versus a punchline? Let's see. In his Netflix specials, he said he was allowed to create characters and events in service of storytelling to sharpen his social points. The quote-unquote emotional truth, he told me repeatedly, was more important. But in Patriot Act, his comedic license took a backseat to the information being conveyed. He seemed to sidestep the possibility that most people likely don't parse which Hasan Minhaj they're watching at a given moment. Minhaj has discussed the white powder incident in interviews without taking the opportunity to clarify that the events he describes on stage, including his daughter's hospitalization, didn't happen as told. Right, so off stage, not in a comedic sense, not in a entertainment format, just being interviewed about your life, you repeat the story again without clarifying. Okay. Quote, I remember in that moment going, oh shit. Okay, I'll say it. Sometimes the envelope pushes back, unquote, he told the Daily Beast in 2022. Oh gosh, I'll give you that. That is some double entendre self-aggrandizement right there. That is some really, that is some creative writing right there. Credit where credit is due. Let me read that one more time. I remember in that moment, remember the moment that he opens up the envelope with the white powder. I remember in that moment going, oh shit, sometimes the envelope pushes back. Yeah, you're pushing the envelope. Oh, I'm such a hero. Oh, God. I asked him if he felt that he had manipulated his audience. Quote, no, I don't think I'm manipulating, he told me. Quote, I think they are coming for the emotional roller coaster ride, unquote. They're coming to be entertained. They're coming to laugh. They're coming for jokes. If they're coming to a comedy show, they are expecting to laugh. If you're just telling stories of tragedy, personal or otherwise, and then, that's like a Hannah Gatsby level sensation of what quote unquote comedy is at that point. Thank you, Austin, for the my hero, Dog Cat Fox. Oh, Dog Cat Fox.
Wowie, wow, wow.
That is a ranting monkey, Dog Cat Fox. Thank you so much, Austin. Appreciate it. Hope you're having a good Sunday. Also, good morning, meh. Those ain't real, dude. Scanner Daffley, Jamie Jam. Anybody else I missed in the TC? Oh, sorry, I did say hello to TC LaChance, but say hello again. Lexi Mads, good morning. And if I missed anyone again, I apologize. All right. So where were we again? I don't think I'm manipulating. They're here for the emotional roller coaster ride. He went on, quote, to the people that are like, yo, that is way too crazy to happen. I don't care because fuck yes, that's the point, unquote. Back to the author, but was his invention of a traumatic experience with his child or with law enforcement entrapment distasteful given the moral heft of those things and the fact that other people have actually experienced them? Quote, it's grounded in truth, unquote, Minhaj said. But it didn't happen to you, I replied. Quote, I think what I'm ultimately trying to do is highlight all of those stories, unquote, he said. Quote, building to what I think is a pointed argument, unquote, as opposed to a, quote, pointless riff, unquote, of jokes. Right. I'm glad our author has pointed that out. It's like, okay, so you've taken things that have happened to real people and you've concocted scenarios that you say happened to you to associate yourself with actual tragedies or miscarriages of justice to make yourself a victim. I think it was very apropos at the beginning that the author talked about Minhaj's social justice commentary, as oftentimes social justice is about forming a victim narrative. Minhaj has elided, ooh, that's a good word, elided or concocted other details in his stories, often to place himself more squarely at the center of the action. Oh, quote, I haven't talked about this publicly, Minhaj says in the King's Jester. For some reason, my brain wants to say gesture instead of jester. About his attempt to interview Mohammed bin Salman in 2018. The Saudi crown prince was doing a U.S. public relations blitz, meeting with Michael Bloomberg and Oprah, among others, and Minhaj set up a meeting at the Saudi embassy in D.C. to discuss the prospect of a sit down with him. So wait, a stand-up comedian tried to set up an interview at the Saudi embassy to interview the crown prince. I mean, I guess, aim for the moon and hope you hit the mountains, I guess. Minhaj's wife, he says, disapproved of his attempts to antagonize the Saudis, so he hid the visit from her. Okay. A theme of the special is her resistance to his despot-baiting comedy stylings. On Heilman's podcast, Minhaj said that his comedy, quote, put my marriage through a lot, and the King's Jester is an exploration of how far I'm willing to take a joke, unquote. Oh, so brave. That envelope being pushed so hard. During the special, Minhaj describes the meeting at the Saudi embassy as vaguely hostile. The Saudis said they didn't want to be ridiculed by a comedian and that they'd be watching him. Minhaj took a train back to New York, where upon arrival, he recalls, quote, everybody at the office is texting me, are you okay? Are you all right? Are you watching the news? Unquote. According to Minhaj, news had just broken about the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Quote, thank God you didn't meet with the Saudis, unquote, his wife told him. Okay. Minhaj admits to feeling guilty about not being more forthright with his wife, but he also loved the attention that Patriot Act received when it aired a well-timed episode soon after the murder. He was invited to the Time 100 Gala, where he says that he watched Jared Kushner enter the room and boorishly sit in a seat that had been ceremonially kept empty for an imprisoned Saudi activist. Minhaj admonished Donald Trump's son-in-law for his inaction on human rights. Minhaj's fame rose, threats proliferated, and eventually we hear about the anthrax episode. But According to a producer with knowledge of Minhaj's schedule, Minhaj's meeting at the Saudi embassy happened at least a month before Khashoggi's murder, something an email confirms. Minhaj says he said he conflated the timelines as a storytelling device. No, I believe you. No, in this instance, I totally believe you. I believe you conflated the timelines as a storytelling device. Oh, man. Minhaj said that he'd conflated the timelines as a storytelling device to, quote, make it feel the way it felt, unquote.
Oh, I went down to the trading post about 3 months ago and I bought myself some snacks. And then the trading post burned down yesterday. I hadn't been in 3 months, but man, just imagine if I'd walked in the trading post today. I would have been burned alive. I'm going to say I walked in yesterday because it feels right.
His, quote, day-to-day life is not very interesting or compelling, unquote. Yes, that is the hallmark of a fabulist. That is the hallmark of a fabulist. Someone who has, by circumstance or choice or whatever else, a relatively mundane and uninteresting life. And in order to spice things up, to make people think they're more interesting or to make themselves feel more interesting, they make up stories about a more interesting life that they don't actually have. Yes, that's being called a fabulist. Quote, my comedy storytelling certainly has to be. It's not comedy, dude. There's no punchline in any of these stories. You're giving out anecdotes that have no punchline. They just make you look like a victim or somebody else look like a villain in order to make yourself feel like you were there when something important happened. That's it. And although Minhaj did very publicly criticize Kushner at the Time 100 Gala for the Trump administration's feeble response to Saudi human rights violations, there was no ceremonial seat set aside for an activist, let alone one that Kushner sat in. Why am I not surprised? Minhaj said this was another fabrication that served to drive home the, quote, emotional truth, unquote, of the moment. So you're going to convict someone of a crime they did not commit because you didn't like them. I don't like Jared Kushner. It was even worse that time I saw him stomp on the head of a doggy. He never stomped on the head of a doggy. Yeah, but he feels like the kind of guy that would. There's a palpable discomfort among comedians when they are asked to comment on another person's art, a sort of code of omerta. But a number of writers and performers who spoke with me bristled at Minhaj's moralizing posture. Quote, he tonally presents himself as a person who is always taking down the despots and dictators of the world and always speaking truth to power, unquote, one former Patriot Act employee said. Quote, that's grating, unquote. A comedy writer who has worked for The Daily Show said that most comics acts wouldn't pass a rigorous fact check, but if a show is building on sharing something personal that's not necessarily laugh out loud funny, the invention of important details could make an audience feel justifiably cheated. Quote, if he's lying about real people and real events, that's a problem, unquote, the writer said. Quote, so much of the appeal of these stories is this really happened, unquote. Yeah, exactly. This is the difference between a premise for a comedy bit and then making up something out of whole cloth and involving other people and saying as though it were true. Minhaj's projects blur the lines between entertainment and opinion journalism. Do they? Because every example you've given so far in this article has just been a telling a story. I don't know that I've heard one joke so far relayed to us, right? Like not even one I could imagine being said on a stage. Jon Stewart, who popularized the mainstream format of comedic news, has always insisted that he is not a journalist, but it was impossible to deny that his daily show served up opinionated jokes that informed the series' predominantly younger audiences. Yes, it's true. He was usually talking about real stories and relaying real events and then commenting on them in a comedic way. He was never a journalist. He was just a glorified commentator, which is fine, which is what I am. I'm a glorified commentator on this stuff. John Oliver has also denied that he's a journalist, though each episode of his HBO show dives into a topic of public import. AI, solitary confinement, tech monopolies. It's not opinion journalism. Yeah. If you're, it's editorializing. I guess that's as kind as you can be about it. It's glorified editorializing. Comedians might not be comfortable calling themselves anything but comedians, but a number of them, Minhaj included, have inserted themselves pointedly into political conversation. They've become the oddball public intellectuals of our time, and in informing the public, they assume a certain status as moral arbiters. Well, they might assume it for themselves. Whether they actually possess it, I suppose, is up to the person watching it at the time. When fibs are told to prove a social point rather than to elicit an easy laugh, does their moral weight change? Yes. If you're lying and inserting yourself into a fabulist situation, it says something about you and also puts into question everything you've ever said about yourself or any kind of truth that you may have to relay. Ishmael Laufty, a comedian who worked in the Patriot Act writers' room, defended Minhaj, particularly when it came to the FBI informant story. Okay, Laufty, who grew up Muslim in Florida, mentioned stories he'd heard about Tampa area mosques being infiltrated after 9/11. Quote, maybe it's just 3 or 4 facts he combined into one, Lautfi. Okay, I'm trying to at least attempt to get that right. Quote, every stand-up you see who's telling any joke, there is an element of truth, but then the thing that provokes laughter is dishonest. I can see how you would find it sort of disreputable, but at the same time, I don't think that that's a story I've heard anyone talk about, unquote. There was no joke. There was no punchline. He was relaying these things as sob stories to put himself in a victimhood narrative that bolstered his own life, which isn't nearly as interesting or apparently struggling as he would describe, which leads me to believe that his real life actually hasn't been that bad, which, of course, it's difficult to position yourself in Hollywood and otherwise in what is supposed to be some sort of like perpetual struggle of demographic if you don't have a story of struggle to relay. So you just make one up. In fact, the president of the mosque that Minhaj attended while growing up remembered an incident in the post-9/11 era of a man coming to the mosque one Friday and acting suspiciously enough that the imam called a lawyer at the Council on American Islamic Relations, who, in turn, called the FBI. The man never appeared at the mosque again, but it's easy to see how an incident like that would make an impression on Minhaj. When it came to the story about anthrax, Lautfi said that it had struck him as extraordinary when he'd watched The King's Jester, but that it got at sincere feelings that Minhaj had experienced during Patriot Act's run. What? Quote, there definitely was real fear that was palpable, Lautfi said. Okay, feeling fear and receiving an envelope full of powder that fell onto your daughter, you then took to the hospital, and then you were chewed out by your wife for putting the entire family in danger by being such a dictator and despot desire. That's no. Minhaj received death threats online. Did he? And according to his security guard, a former NYPD officer, a letter was sent to Netflix threatening Minhaj, but it didn't contain any powder. You know, I'm getting some Jussie Smollett vibes here about mysterious letters being sent to the studio. Minhaj also acknowledged to me that the threatening tweets displayed on the large screen during The King's Jester were not authentic, but rather heightened for comedic effect. Okay. Nothing I hear from this guy, I believe now. Nothing. Everything has to be verified and vetted now. Everything. And kudos on the author for going to the effort on this. Patriot Act was lauded for its comedy with a purpose, and its cancellation during the pandemic was mourned by fans. Okay. Quote, Patriot Act provided biting comedy and cultural analysis with an eye to the South Asian diaspora, a population that has historically suppressed such discourse, unquote, one eulogy for the show read. Many stories on the cancellation also mentioned a series of tweets from former female employees of color alluding to their poor work experience behind the scenes. Oh. A document reviewed by The New Yorker revealed that 3 women had hired an attorney and threatened litigation against Netflix and Patriot Act's production company, alleging gender discrimination, sex-based harassment, and retaliation. Okay, I am going to attempt this name, but I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to try. Prashanth Venkatara Manajam. Okay. Minaj's creative partner and the show's co-creator said that he had been surprised by the tweets. Quote, clearly some people who worked at the show did not enjoy their experience, which is painful to hear, he said in a statement. Quote, we tried very hard to make Patriot Act one of the most inclusive and diverse spaces in all of late night, and it was, unquote. The legal matter settled out of court. Okay. So it's kind of a push there. All right. According to former Patriot Act employees, members of the research department felt that Minaj could be dismissive of the fact-checking process. You don't say. Quote, Minaj just assembled people around him to make him appear different and much smarter and more thoughtful, unquote, a female researcher said. I don't know why her gender is of import here. Quote, but those people, the smart people and hardworking people, were treated poorly for bringing the perspective that he is celebrated for, unquote. Like other comedy news shows, Patriot Act hired journalists to write briefing memos based on reporting and research that were meant to serve as the factual basis for 25-minute episodes on topics such as Amazon, protests in Sudan, and corruption in cricket. In one instance, Minaj grew frustrated that fact-checking was stymieing the creative flow during a final rewrite, and a pair of female researchers were asked to leave the writer's room. They sat in the hall for more than an hour, listening to the meeting continue without them, and later had to scramble to insert factual revisions. Later in the show's run, researchers were no longer invited into the writer's room for rewrites. Only the male head of the research department was allowed in. Women researchers said they felt shunted to the side. Venkatara Manujam. Venkatara Manujam. I'm trying, guys. Said that the decision was meant to streamline the show's process and was not designed to exclude individual researchers. He also said that researchers being sent out of rewrites was standard practice and that the researchers chose to stay in the hall. Okay, quote, fact-checking at Patriot Act was extremely rigorous, Minaj said in a written statement. Okay, at this point, I don't think Minaj should be the one assuring people of the accuracy of information. I'm just saying. Quote, a team of news producers fact-checked every line of every draft of every script at least 8 to 10 times before I ever said anything on camera, unquote. Oh, did they fact-check your story about the envelope? Did they fact-check your story about Brother Eric? Because that made it on the air. Whoa. Minaj often talks about his immigrant upbringing and the social alienation that sometimes came with being a racial minority in his hometown. The central story of his first Netflix special, Homecoming King, which was released in 2017, is about his crush on a friend, a white girl whom he shared a stolen kiss and who accepted his invitation to prom, but later reneged in a humiliating fashion. Did she, though? Minaj showed up on her doorstep the night of the dance only to see another boy putting a corsage on her wrist. If she reneged, is that, so wait, she said nothing? Okay. On stage, Minaj says that his friend's parents didn't want their daughter to take pictures with a brown boy because they were concerned about what their relatives might think. Quote, I'd eaten off their plates, Minaj says. Quote, I'd kissed their daughter. I didn't know that people could be bigoted even as they were smiling at you, unquote. Okay, and just because I'm a stickler for this, there's a difference between being racist and being bigoted. Bigoted means you hate someone for their opinions, their thoughts, their ideas, and so on. Racist means you hate someone because of what they are. You can be a bigot and a racist, it's true, but you can be a bigot without being a racist and vice versa. Just so we're on the same playing field. I know. But the woman disputed certain facts. Oh, they found her? Okay. She told me that she turned down Minhaj, who was then a close friend, in person days before the dance. Minhaj acknowledged that this was correct, but he said that the two of them had long carried different understandings of her rejection. No, whoa. Here we are back again at the Kamal Khashoggi thing. So you went to the embassy a month prior to everything, but then you sort of conflated timelines. But now you're just making something out of whole cloth. You showed up on her doorstep, and her, without having said anything to you prior, is getting a corsage pinned on her by another boy. That's different than having a misunderstanding of a motivation over a decision. Okay, going back a little bit, Minhaj acknowledged that this was correct, but he said the two of them had long carried different understandings of her rejection. Because you'd talked to her about it in the meantime? Okay. As a, quote, brown kid in Davis, California, unquote, he said he'd been conditioned to put his head down and, quote, just take it, and I did, unquote. The emotional truth of the story, he told on stage, was resonant and justified the fabrication of details. Quote, there are so many other kids who have had a similar sort of doorstep experience, he said. Okay. So, nothing interesting happened to me, so I'm going to make up something that associates me with other people who have had things happen to them. You know what this would be called in many other instances? Stolen valor. I don't know what else to tell you. I've been victimized by this. I've been persecuted by that. This person did this horrible thing to me. I almost ended up in this tragedy. Stolen valor. Or maybe more accurately for most of these stories, stolen victimhood. The woman also said that she and her family had faced online threats and doxing for years because Minhaj had insufficiently disguised her identity, including the fact that she was engaged to an Indian American man. Let me read that one again. Again, I haven't read this article before. This is all revelation to me. The woman also said that she and her family had faced online threats and doxing for years because Minhaj had insufficiently disguised her identity, including the fact that she was engaged to an Indian American man. A source with knowledge of the production said that, during the show's off-Broadway run, Minhaj had used a real picture of the woman and her partner with their faces blurred, projected behind him as he told the story. The woman said that Minhaj had invited her and her husband to an off-Broadway performance. She had initially interpreted the invitation as an attempt to rekindle an old friendship, but she now believes the move was meant to humiliate her. Later, she said, when she confronted Minhaj about the online threats brought on by the Netflix special, quote, I spent years trying to get threads taken down, unquote, she told me, Minhaj shrugged off her concerns. Minhaj said that he didn't recall that interaction and pointed to the fact that he had been in touch with her prior to the airing of the special, recommending she scrub social media posts that might indicate her relationship to him. Minhaj also noted the tone of their texts and emails was always friendly. Wow, what a prince this guy is. Hey, before my special goes live, in which I completely vilify you and make up an entire scenario where you're a terrible racist, you might want to disconnect yourself from me on your social media. Just letting you know, because I'm a thoughtful guy. What is the truth in this instance? Homecoming King offers a broader observation about the often insidious nature of racism in American suburbs. But what duty does the storyteller have to the real person who is on the other side of his tale, whether it be a high school crush or a felon turned FBI informant? in parenthetical, Minhaj said that he owed nothing to Montiel, the FBI guy, brother Eric, based on his behavior towards the Muslim community. Okay, but you lied about him doing a thing he couldn't possibly have done and added on to his litany of... Okay, here's the thing. I've talked about this before. If you convict and or accuse someone knowingly of something they did not do, even if that person is a terrible person, you have now made them an innocent victim of your lies. This is why you don't want someone you hate to be accused of or convicted of something they did not do, because then they become a genuine victim. They deserve genuine sympathy, even if they're a terrible person the rest of the day. But okay, he did a bad thing, so I don't feel bad telling a story about him that didn't happen to bolster my own image. All right, I guess you don't owe him anything. The nature of storytelling, let alone comedic storytelling, is inventive. Its primary aim is to make an impression, to amuse, or to engage. But the stakes appear to change when entertainers fabricate anecdotes about current events and issues of social injustice. Holy cats, Brett Ide just popped out over here on the chat. Come on, catch up there, streamer. Thank you so much. Wish I could stick around, but life happens and I gotta help mom. Well, of course, mom deserves all the help. Thank you so much, Brett. That's very generous of you. I hope you and your mom have a good day, and I hope mom's all right. Hope nothing too untoward happened. And my sister and I were talking about that yesterday, and my parents are so reluctant to ask for help or to say that they're both going in for surgery soon on their feet, which is going to make it difficult for them to move around, obviously, for the foreseeable future. And we kept anticipating, like, maybe they want us or one of us to come up and hang out for a while and take care of them. I asked my mother yesterday, are you guys all stocked up on supplies? You don't have to go to the store. And she's like, oh, are we ever stocked up? Like, okay. So it's one of those things where if our parents ever even hinted that they might need one or both of us to go up and babysit them for a while or just take care of them, my sister and I are like, we know it's necessary, because they're so reluctant to have to be a burden to us that if they ever even intimated that they needed some help, we'd be like, we're there, we're off, we're going. It's obviously a situation that they need some extra hands. So anyway, thank you so much, Brett. Hope you and your mom have a good day. Hope everything's all right. And thank you again. Appreciate it. Oh man. Okay. Where was I? I got lost in my own anecdote. An anecdote that I swear actually did happen. Okay. Okay, but the stakes appear to change when entertainers fabricate anecdotes about current events and issues of social injustice. In 2015, the comedian Steve Ranazzisi, I'll say Ranazzisi, who appeared on all 7 seasons of FX's The League, admitted that he had lied about evacuating from the Twin Towers on the morning of 9/11, narrowly escaping death when the second plane hit. Yeah, there's a really interesting documentary called The Woman Who Wasn't There, about another individual that made some very, very high claims about herself in relation to 9/11. I won't give away the whole story here. If you're interested, look it up. It's actually pretty interesting. And it really shows how one person can have an effect on an entire community. It's actually kind of an amazing profile of just what one person's efforts, both good and bad, can have on so many other people. But yeah, 9/11 stolen valor is one of the probably worst sins you can commit in this country, or perhaps even the world at this point. In interviews, he had used the story to explain his motivation for abandoning a corporate job in Manhattan to pursue an entertainment career in Hollywood, a trajectory that would have seemed remarkable enough without any embellishment. The writer and monologuist Mike Daisey faced blowback for making up details in his story for This American Life about Apple's Foxconn plant in China, but his point about poor working conditions was an important one to make. Then you make it without lying. Why do you need to lie? Excuse me. I took a sip of something and it went down the proverbial wrong pipe. So, pardon me for that. In a blog post titled Some Thoughts After the Storm, Daisy wrote, quote, "When I said on stage that I had personally experienced things I in fact did not, I failed to honor the contract I'd established with my audiences over many years and many shows," unquote. No, you failed at being a trustworthy person. It's not a contract you'd established with your audience. You failed as a trustworthy person. That still feels like distancing yourself from your responsibility a little bit. Just a little bit. Like somehow the audience is a party to your lie in a way. Yeah. When Minhaj appeared on the comedian Mark Maron's podcast in 2021, the two had a conversation about how comedians portray themselves and their emotional lives on stage. The comedian, Minhaj said, must guide the audience to a particular emotional takeaway. Quote, "Bring it home. What is the point?" Unquote. Maron seemed to raise the idea that in Homecoming King, Minhaj had constructed an onstage emotional history that wasn't entirely honest. Quote, "Your show was tight, it was effective, it had a message, the punchline at the end was very clever. It was good, the story was good, you lucked out with these life things and you organized them," unquote, he said. Quote, "I'm not criticizing that, I'm just saying that there's a big difference between what you put out into the world and who you are personally," unquote. Okay. Look up the story of Stephen Glass. In fact, watch the movie Shattered Glass. It's one of the rare instances where you get to see Hayden Christensen, A, not playing Darth Vader, and B, actually acting. That's really good to watch. Yeah, somebody might have a story that's actually kind of interesting, but boy, it would be perfect if I just had that one perfect quote. If I had that one perfect element to enhance the story from its still interesting but relatively mundane or origins, but make it really just perfect. Yeah. Fabulism. Lying. Okay. He went on, quote, "When you talk about your father or that woman that jilted you in high school or whatever, you're going to have to weigh the repercussions. Either you respect them or you don't. And then you have to balance that out. At what point is this disrespectful? And at what point do I not give a shit anymore?" Unquote. Minhaj seems unconflicted about his choices. Quote, "You have got to take the shots you were given in life, even if they're built on a lie," unquote, Minhaj says during a bit in The King's Jester, good gravy. Quote, oh, sorry, not quote. When we spoke, I asked where he, sorry, okay, I'm stumbling at the last minute here. I apologize. When we spoke, I asked, were he to get the Daily Show hosting job, if his fabrications could put him in a compromised position when commenting on someone such as George Santos. George Santos? Okay, that came out of nowhere. Minhaj brushed off the question. Quote, "I think when George Santos says he's on the volleyball team, it's a pointless story," he responded. I see. Okay. So if Minhaj is doing a story on someone who themselves is a fabulist, can he legitimately comment on someone like that? Okay. Took me a second there. I was like, what? Let's see. So when he's on the that's not the totality of George Santos's stories, though, Hasan. I don't know if you're taking into account the breadth and depth of the George Santos mythos that he created. Yeah, you're right. Him being on the volleyball team might be kind of a silly thing to lie about. There was more. Minhaj's fiction was always in service to a bigger point. Yeah, the bigger point was bolstering his own sense of self-importance. The point was getting sympathy from people. The point was gaining leverage in the industry as a glorified victim of the system and taking advantage of Hollywood and the entertainment complex's desire and hunger for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and especially victim narratives. You're not servicing society by enriching yourself through lying. Just, even when he's trying to explain himself, he just digs himself deeper. Minaj's quote-unquote fiction was always in service to a bigger point, putting him in a different moral category than Santos. He appeared unwilling to engage with the idea that his position in the comedic landscape is unique, or that the host of a comedy news show might be held to more stringent standards of accuracy across his body of work. When it came to his stage shows, he told me, quote, "The emotional truth is first. The factual truth is secondary," unquote. The end. And just for reference's sake, this article, credit where credit is due, this article was written by Claire Malone and published on September 15th, 2023 in The New Yorker. Well, there you go. That is that is some kind of mental gymnastics taking place there to justify being a completely untrustworthy person, entertainer, or just individual. Yeah, there's a difference between making up a story or embellishing something for a comedic punchline in a set, on a stage, behind a mic. It's another thing to be a fabulist. It's another thing to be an outright liar, and then to gain an advantage from those lies and pretend that they are a truth. And then as well, collaterally, to victimize other people who did nothing wrong and to step on them to elevate yourself. The lady who turned him down for a date in high school. I guess victimizing her was worth the advantage to his career. I'm not quite sure that much else needs to be said about the character of an individual when you know that to be the case. Okay, Ostsan, wait, Hayden Christensen can act? Yes. Check out Shattered Glass. Also check out, I think it's called Life as a House. Christensen can act. It's true. When given the right material and direction, yeah. So yeah, there's that. Let's see. What else do we have? Scanner Daffley. There is no such thing as an emotional truth. I could see the phrase meaning something in the correct context, right? Depending on how you're using it, but as applied to this, no. He's telling autobiographical stories. Yeah, emotional truth does not get you out of "I lied." That doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense, in fact. Nothing of this guy's stories of woe can ever be taken seriously again. All of them need to be investigated, if anybody bothers to. Because how many times does the boy have to cry wolf, right? Anyway, those ain't real, dude. Hasan leveraged liberal guilt and his minority status rather than his talent. I have to question his talent now, too. If he's willing to lie about his life, where did he get his jokes? This is the thing. This is, I've made this metaphor before. Imagine taking a photo album, right? And imagine this photo album represents everything you know about a person, right? Everything you ever experienced with this person, everything you ever felt about this person, everything. And all of a sudden you find out that this person lied to you about very important things. You know what happens then? You might as well take that photo album, close it, and then with the page ends facing upwards, pour a big glass of grease all over the ends of the pages and let it sit for a minute, right? And watch as the grease kind of seeps down in between the pages. Then open up the photo album again. And you know what you've got? Every memory of this person, everything you thought to be true of this person, now tainted with doubt. Because as soon as you find out that somebody's willing to lie about not only little things, but certainly about important things, everything falls into question. Everything. Thank you so much, C. Thomas. He comes off sounding like Amy Schumer. Little bit. But in this case, it's not so much as where did your jokes come from, so much as everything you're telling us about your life of adventure and struggle and victimhood is all lies. Right. And here's the real interesting thing that I sort of the negative space of this article. If the author, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, maybe the author didn't go this far, maybe they stopped at a certain point because why bother? But if the author could find any validity to any of the major stories told by Minhaj, I would assume we would be told this event actually happened. Right? To say that he's not completely full of shit. But unfortunately, nothing like that is there. Every single pertinent story and every person around him that had anything to do with it, even peripherally, puts doubt into everything he's ever said about himself. So you got to wonder, how much of this guy is actually true at all? And you know whose fault that is? It's his fault. Lexi Mads, comedian lied. He should take some lessons from Jimmy Carr. Bring back edgy comedy. Yeah, if you're funny, you can be funny using anything. You don't have to make stuff up about yourself. You can just make stuff up for the sake of the joke. And people will know it's a joke because it sounds ridiculous. And you don't lean on it as part of your biography. Right? And that's not to say you can't have something happen in your life that was absolutely true and totally ridiculous and funny and everything else. That's happened to lots of people. But whole cloth involving other people, vilifying and demonizing people who actually exist to the point where they're tracked down and harassed, and then you sort of hand wave that away for the sake of your own career. Yeah, no, this is pretty bad. Lexi Mass, I laughed at a Schumer joke once. My boyfriend was amazed. Turns out it was a stolen joke. Yeah, that's great. Some people spend years crafting jokes and someone just picks it up off of watching a TV show and it still works. It still works. Let's see, who else is here? Matt, his parents are from the place where the scammers are making their calls from. Oh, jeez. I just watched, if you guys don't know, there's a great channel on YouTube. There's several channels. There's Nano Bader, Jim Browning. But Scammers Payback just put up like an hour-long special where they did a 2-week, 100-person team takedown of a whole bunch of scammer call centers and things. And I like watching. My parents, and this is not fabulism, my parents were actually taken in by one of those scams. It was the one where they call you up and they say, or they send you an email that says, Amazon has charged this thing to your account for $400. It's a fake email. My mom called the number and she got taken in by the whole chargeback scam, where they go into your computer and they change the amount on the screen and they say, oh no, I've over refunded you. You need to go to your bank and you need to get the cards and do this, that, and the other. They were taken in by that. And so I watch those channels now with a certain level of satisfaction in vengeance for my parents being, thankfully my parents got clued into the thing at the last minute, unfortunately, but fortunately they were not otherwise taken advantage of beyond that, and now they're wiser for it, so that's good. But yeah, Scammers Payback. Like those guys a lot. Lexi Mads, even Indians hate scammers because it makes the country look terrible and gives them a really bad international reputation. Yeah, the laws in that country and the enforcement of certain things are all over the place. Like one of the major problems that the Scammers Payback guys and other people have is just trying to say, hey, law enforcement, here's all this evidence, documentary evidence, video evidence of these scammer call centers working right in your neighborhood. Could you go bust them up? And the odds that actually happens, or that the police themselves aren't corrupted in some way and notify the call center ahead of time. Yeah, so these things keep going. And yeah, I don't believe that anybody's all that jazzed about criminal operations working in their country. Like most normal people probably would not look kindly upon that. So yeah. Let's see. Anything else? Death threats online. Yeah. Anything in his story. Anything. Right. Oh, a letter was received at the studio. Was it? And if it was, who wrote it? Again, Jussie Smollett all over again. But except this is the Jussie Smollett that got away with it. Right? He got away with it because he was telling stories that weren't easy to disprove. Except for our author here just had to look up a few facts about the individuals involved and it all falls apart. But he banked on this and he made a career out of this over years. So how much of it was real? Probably nothing. How much of it was emotion? Probably nothing. How much of it was greed? Almost all of it. But anyway, I'm going to call it here, guys. My voice is starting to give. I can only go so long talking straight. So without a video to sort of break up my my tonal exercise, I need to take a rest. But yeah, a little off the beaten path from my usual content. I want to thank Sister Scribe for cluing me into this article just for fun. It was interesting. It was entertaining to hear someone try to jump around their own lies to try to defend themselves. I'll be curious to see, well, it would be amazing if he got the Daily Show job, wouldn't it? After all this, it would be amazing. It'll say something about Comedy Central if he does. But I guess we'll see. I hadn't even thought about the Daily Show in so long. All the talk shows, with the writer's strike on and everything else, I didn't really care about them beforehand. I don't really care about them now. The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, back in the day, pretty good. The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, that was pretty good. I never paid attention to much else. I didn't even know that his Patriot Act show, I think I'd heard of it. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know it was canceled. I didn't know it was a late night show. I had no idea. Oh, well, there's nothing new under the sun except the history you don't know. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me. If I missed something in the comments, please leave a comment down below. Also, I completely forgot, even though I was the one that posted them to the top of the chat box, the fundraisers. Oh my gosh. To our friends Joshua, Maddie, and Lisa, if you guys can take a look at those and donate. If you can, that's great. If you can't donate, that's perfectly fine. But if you can, share those out on social media. That would be appreciated. Also, if you didn't already know, I have mentioned it once or twice, I have a Discord server where people can talk about stuff and things and stuff and the shows and auto parts and, the hitting people with sticks and what's going on in their lives and so on. Anyway, there's a link in the chat now to the Discord. In addition to hitting the Discord link, which will take you to the landing channel called Say Hello, where you say hello, you also have to give us the secret word for the stream. The secret word will tell me and my moderators that you watched the show and thus have earned the right to become a member of the Discord stream. And the secret word for today's show is fabulist. Fabulist, fabulist. So there you go. But with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, either to myself or to the fundraisers at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. Really do appreciate it. Programming note, tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern will be the next installment of Book Review of the Vampire, where my friend Leonora and I continue our foray into The Vampire Lestat, the second book in Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, we just read the section called The Vampire Armand. So if you're following along, that is the section we just finished. We'll talk about that later tonight. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you have a good rest of your Sunday and weekend ahead of you. Hope your week is good as well. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.